to talk about what it means to automate with purpose. And so content of the presentation, I'll be starting around what is happening, but very briefly, moving on to what is happening, what I'm seeing with my organizations I work with in relation to COVID-19 and what are the key things happening, especially in the health space area. Then I'm going to move on to the principle, in particular in relation to the ethical principles and the privacy by design and the trade-offs that need to be navigated in order for companies to face up the increased scrutiny coming from both regulators and the general public. And then we're going to look at the regulatory framework. What is happening in the UK, in the EU, and globally in a fast evolving regulatory landscape. And then quickly moving on and what are the skills that need to be acquired. So these are sort of landscape about what I see, what is happening, and we've heard the finance sort of side from Adam, which was brilliant. I'm just going to mention that projects I work on relate to energy, pharmaceutical, legal. I do a lot of work with legal companies. They're really looking at automate or aid their decision makers by introducing a layer of support driven by artificial intelligence, telecoms, the energy. There is a lot of this stuff happening everywhere, but I would agree with a lot of the attendees. What they've said is that the majority of companies that I work with, what they are experiencing right now is they feel they are at an initial stage. They feel that they do want to innovate. They do want to do it properly. They do want to include resilience and in what they're doing, but sometimes it's not that easy to start. And it's not that easy to start also because there is so much uncertainty around the regulatory environment. And there's so much uncertainty around who is liable for what we are doing. How does privacy legislation applies to what I'm doing? How do I navigate those trade-offs that could actually put me at risk? And I'll come to that later. And I think within all this, it's really important that companies adopt the right approach from the start. I just want to quickly talk about the COVID era, because my general feeling around this is that COVID-19, this pandemic, will do two things. First of all, will normalize a lot of the digitalization that we're seeing right now. We normalize the working from home. We normalize, so that's what we're getting accustomed to. But on the other end, I think is also shown the companies to be able to change and adapt in a very fast and quick way. Therefore, the ability, the flexibility and adaptability becomes absolutely important, and the resilience of companies to go through what we've been through with the pandemic will certainly speed up automation and speed up digitalization. This is why it's really important that if companies want to go down the path, and they have to, most of them, is really important to say, let's take the right steps to do so. And what we're seeing is really in the diagnosis field, in the healthcare sector, what we've seen is AI-driven COVID-19 diagnosis, a model. So in the healthcare sector, what we are seeing really is some really good opportunities where artificial intelligence is helping companies. So what we're seeing and helping the medical profession. So we're seeing AI-driven COVID-19, but we're also seeing the area of prevention and surveillance. So we are looking at, for example, 24-hour access to personalized recommendation and information. There is the area around contact tracing, which is rather complex, and the area around video and digital GP consultancies. I mean, there's so many areas where we are seeing a really big impact on artificial intelligence in the field. All this comes with challenges, and I work with organizations that really want to, for example, use technology and biometrics to support employees returning to work. And this comes with great challenges from a privacy and ethical perspective. And also, what is the other big challenge we're facing, I always say to organizations, don't race to techno-solutionism. Don't race to it. Do something because you think there is a purpose into what you're doing. And this is very true, particularly now, when there is a lot of glamour around solutions, around biometrics, around biosurveillance that can aid the return of work from employees. But again, these are not risk-free technologies. They really require a privacy and ethics by design approach, the involvement of employees, the involvement of employees' representatives, and the involvement of the wider community when we say we are going to deploy invasive and intrusive technology to aid our return to work, to aid our return to normal life. And that's where privacy becomes important, even in an emergency, if not even more so, because what happens in an emergency then tends to remain as a habit. And therefore, we don't want to sleepwalk into something that we don't really like. And I'm going to give you three main things that I think, in my experience on working with a lot of organizations with their artificial intelligence and digital transformation journey, that I've seen. And I'd be very brief, and please ask me to expand, and I'm happy to do it in one-to-one as well. So three main things, and I really ask organizations to bear this in mind. And it comes from my real experience. The first one is leading by example. If you want to develop and deploy AI and want to do it in the long term, you've got to make sure that you take employees on board. Don't impose onto them. Start with involving them from the early days, and not just the technical teams, but employees across the organizations. This is really important. And this is where the example really matters. I always recommend to CEOs to really attend briefings, encouraging the rollout of machine learning, training and awareness coaching around the ethical considerations. So CEOs and leaders within the company, they really need to lead by examples, and it's really important to do so. I want to add something else, and this is really comes from my taken from the book yesterday as well, the book, my own book. There is a lot of awareness, especially in the tech workforce, and a lot of you, some of you in this call may recognize in what I'm saying. A lot of tech employees and tech workers, they really want to know what they're working towards. They really want to know that what they are producing is actually aiding society and not doing something that impacts negatively on our communities. We've seen the story about Apple today and facial recognition. If you want to retain your technical workforce, which is really important at a time like this, and which is really important because of the scarcity of skills that we still have, make sure that your tech workers, they are involved in what you want to do and the projects that you're involved in. The second thing that I haven't seen, that when I see it works really well, and when I don't see, it really leads to disaster in my view, is value alignment. And Adam really mentioned, you've got to align the innovation that you want to create and invest in to your own company values. I have to say that this is an exercise. I run consequence scanning exercise to really understand what is the impact that this product that I'm going to introduce has on the company, the clients, the customers, but also society at large. And does this align with the value of my own organization? Look, if companies don't do that, I never see their innovation journeys going far. What I mentioned is around value alignment is important, because when I don't see that value alignment, then I don't see the project running far. And the issue this is happening is because not just because there is increased regulatory scrutiny, but also because customers they need to feel that they can trust what they are purchasing. They really need to feel that they can trust the company. When there was a CDI, which is a Center for Data Ethics Institute report coming out a few days ago, really showing how organizations, individuals, customers, they don't really trust algorithms decision making, particularly when it comes to the financial sector, because they don't feel that they can trust, particularly when some categories around of data get introduced into the process, they feel the potential bias out of it. So that is really important, I think, to bear that in mind. And the other thing is organizational structures and responsibility. Do not kick off your innovation journey with AI if you haven't got the right governance and the right structure. And also, don't forget that once you start with AI, organizations and businesses become less hierarchical and need to become much more agile. And that, of course, requires a little bit of change. I'm going to move on quickly onto the regulatory framework that I really want to talk to you about very briefly. So in terms of regulation, we've got a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot around GDPR and automated decision. The Information Commission in the UK yesterday has just published a document on explainable and the guidance on explainable decisions and explainability in AI, which is a very complex topic, and it's not a statutory document, but it's really important to look into it. And the Information Commissioner has also issued a AI auditing framework, which is under review. Again, that's not it's not a piece of law, but it really shows you what the Information Commissioner will be looking at when it comes to check whether a particularized system complies with GDPR. Then you've got the Financial Conduct Authority, and then a plethora of digital strategy documents in the EU, and then standards. And I am, I'm lucky enough to be part of the BSI standards development on AI, and there's a lot of work going into the standards, which I consider being a key part of this process. I just want to give you a snapshot. This is what's happening in the financial sector, and those of you academy in the financial sector will be familiar with the sort of the landscape of regulation coming in the next few months, and not just regulation, but also policy development coming in the UK and a European level. And I put sort of, this is what happened, everything that was put forward, and this is what's going to happen in 2020, and from liability to the use of personal data, from the financial, the FCA, and the work coming from the Information Commissioner Office. This is to give you a picture of how evolving this landscape is. The first element here is that there is, I think, a lot of convergence around the understanding that it's really important to perform a fitness test of current legislation to understand whether it's sufficient to deal with some of the challenges that AI is bringing and in potential harms that AI is bringing. But once that fitness test is happening, then it's really important to move on and understand whether other areas of legislation are necessary, because what we don't want to see, and I think companies will agree with me, what we don't want to see is sweeping regulation without really understanding what is truly needed. One quick message that I want to convey is that when you start embedding all of this into your processes and your wider compliance, artificial intelligence does not exist in isolation. So, for example, if you operate in financial services, the concept of fairness is a concept at the intersection between consumer law, financial regulations, and privacy. So the real challenge is to bring all of this together. And that requires the ability to really say, okay, how do I embed all of this in the design of what I am doing? I just want you to have a quick, just some concepts that I really want you to bring away with you. The first one is around, so you've got a plethora of legislation. So when it comes, for example, to fairness, you have fairness on discrimination, human rights, and all of this exists because they are exist in isolation. But then you've got all this brings trade-offs, because a lot of the decisions, for example, that you need to make around ethical decisions, they involve privacy, they involve other complex situations. So the first concept that I want you to understand is that ethics of AI, which is very much of a buzzword at the moment, starts when the law ends. And this is because you can apply the law, but there will be trade-offs that need to be decided. And this is where ethics comes in, because you've got all the regulatory requirements, everything that you need to comply. But there are elements, especially in relation to harms, that are much more complex in AI systems. And those are the elements where you need to apply ethics. They normally work in terms of the pillars of when you want to develop a new project, what are you looking at? First thing you look at purpose and impact. Look, without doing this exercise, I don't think that an AI project has got much success, because the first thing is look at the purpose alignment. So, which is what I meant earlier, which is, what do I want to do? What is my aim? What do I want to achieve as an organization? And does it align with what I want to do, through a consequence scanning of implications and consequences, both in the short and the long term? And I want to be clear about this. The consequence scanning is not an easy exercise. It cannot be done by the same people who are actually developing the project, but it needs to be more participatory. And when I see companies involving stakeholders in saying, hey, this is what I really want to do, what do you think about it? What could the consequences be? Then I think this works really well. And the other thing that I wanted to say is that the purpose and an impact is crucial, because it allows organization to be accountable and to say, this is what I am doing. And especially because at the moment, what we're seeing is that we've seen a proliferation of very glamorous projects, very glamorous products that do not respond to any real need. So first start with the need. What do I need? And this is really a key thing. Then you've got to move on to the concept of fairness and justice. So fairness is the most complex element, and I do work with organizations to really help them navigate the concept of fairness. Fairness is whether an outcome of a project is biased or not. And there are different mathematical solutions to this, and not all, they're all incompatible between them. And some look at output, some, and say, for example, I want the same output if it comes to lending. I want people from a certain background to have the same output of another background, but sometimes that is not sometimes the parity in the outcome is not what equality is all about. So it's very complex to navigate the fairness concept. There is a fairness in the data collection and data processing, and there is an element of sort of what are the key tools that we deploy to mitigate the risk of unfair outcomes and bias in these systems. Some of this can be automated, some can't, and it's a very complex area that I spend a lot of time with companies to really understand how to navigate it. The other element, and the final one, is the human-centered values. And this, to me, relates to the wider transparency and accountability. It relates to the concept of explainability. And again, this is not a straightforward concept, explainability. Look, explainability means that you have to be able to provide your customers with information, meaningful information about the fact that, first of all, if you do use automation and automated decision systems, that you are doing so. But also, automation is very contextual. Somebody in health sector, for example, a patient, wouldn't necessarily want to know how a particular automated decision system works. They don't care. What they would care about is that it's accurate. What they would care about is that it produces the right result. Whilst a practitioner will have to know how that particular decision has been made, because they respond to it. So explainability is very much contextual, and that's therefore is really important to navigate what is explainability, how is the organization going to put explainability into practice. And I work on different models around it, and the one I favor is more around legibility and publicity by design. I'm up with time, but the last thing I wanted to really focus on, and I'm going to close on this slide actually, is really to say this. Assurance is important, and really facing up the scrutiny they may come regulators across the spectrum is important. So embedding all of these concepts that I've explained to you in this into the design, and say, okay, I'm going to develop this system. I'm looking to log all the decisions around privacy and all the decisions around what I'm going to do when navigating, for example, the trade-offs around accuracy and data minimization. The more data you've got, the better it is. But the problem is, how does it fit with the principle of data minimization? The more you really are able to understand all of this, introducing it in the design and respecting it and being accountable for every single step, the more then you're able to face the scrutiny when regulators come and say, hey, I want to know how you're informing your customers. I want to know about explainability. How are you being explainable? And not just the regulators, but also I think the most important thing is if you want customers to really trust what you're doing and to really say, well, actually, I am okay with a lending decision being made by an automated system. And if we want to move to a situation where we really make the most of artificial intelligence and automated system to support and augment our capabilities, then trust is a crucial issue in my view.